Hey, you're listening to a mainstream podcast from the young adult ministry, The Voice. We hope you enjoy.
Good evening. Happy Sunday. Are you guys excited to be in church tonight? There's literally never a scenario where that would be a no. Like, just even if you're not, like, that's always an automatic yes to the preacher. Okay. I'm happy you guys are here. I'm happy to be here. Actually, it's been like a cool week because something really significant at Mainstream started. Can my first year MLC students, can you stand to your feet? Stand up. Don't be ashamed. Stay standing. So we have, you'll hear us call them interns. They're also students. But we have a program here that's just a really intense ministry training program. Also, they do college. So, no big deal. Like, 2 really huge commitments. These guys have committed to 2 years in this program. 2 years of serving the church in a capacity that most people will never understand. 2 years of putting aside maybe their plans, putting aside their priorities, really putting a ginormous amount of faith in God, saying, Lord, I will trust you and I will give you these 2 years. Maybe I've passed up other opportunities because I know this is where you have me. So these guys, they need your prayers because they are at like the beginning stages of this commitment. And they're going to serve in ways that you're never going to see, but that's going to impact you and your friends and your family and your unsaved loved ones over the next year. So remember their faces and pray for them. Second years, join them. First year, stay standing. These are my second year MLC students. If they seem a little more stressed, it's because they know what they signed up for and they know what they're coming back for. These guys are midway through a commitment like this. They came to us last year and we were like, this is what it is. And they were like, bet, I'll see you next year. They came back after they knew what we were going to ask of them and what God was going to ask of them. They're midway through this huge commitment, and they're now leading the first years in it. And they are you're looking at the future pastors and the future missionaries of this world. And so we love them so much. There's so many alumni in this room that can attest to what an awesome 2 years and what a challenging 2 years this program is. So remember these beautiful faces and remember them in your prayers. We love you guys. Thank you so much. Go ahead and have a seat. MLC started this year. We're so excited to have our interns here. We're excited about a lot of things coming up. Like next week. Does anyone know what's happening 1 week from now? Yes, woo would actually is an incorrect answer, but I get it's like the emotion behind what's happening. We have Motor City happening. It's the premiere of a 3-part musical production. And here's the thing. The only reason we're doing a production like this is so that the lost would be found. Like, that's it. Like, the amount of work and sweat and tears and building and inviting that goes into this. And it's, like, awesome. Has anyone been here for, like, a voice production before? It's, like, amazing. And you're like, what would I miss 1 week? What happened? Who fell in love? Like, it's a whole thing. But, man, the heart behind it is that the lost would be found. And that's what we've been talking about during Search Party. We've been talking about finding lost things. We've been reading through Luke chapter 15, where Jesus tells a story about lost things and the celebration that happens when they're found. So do you remember the first part of Luke 15? What was lost? Pastor Jason, he preached on it. The sheep was lost. And it was one sheep lost, and the shepherd left the 99 and went to find the one. And we have to also go with him when he does that. And then last week, what did we lose? A coin. And we swept the house, and we looked in every little crevice to find our coin. You guys got your coins? No. Okay, how dare you. And so this week, we're going to end on a big note, just like Jesus did. I think he was telling this story to people, and he was connecting with like parts of them, like, oh, some shepherds are going to care about lost sheep, and then some people will care about the lost coin. And I think that he ended it with this story because he knew whether shepherd or whatever you cared about, this was going to hit them the hardest. And so we're going to continue in this story in Luke 15. It says to illustrate his point further. He just talked about the sheep. He just talked about the coin. Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. Which, by the way, is super rude. Probably could have gotten that son killed in that culture because to dishonor your father and mother was like punishable by death. Thank goodness for most of us that is no longer the case. Sorry, mom and dad. Okay. So he was basically saying, like, you're dead to me, Dad, so I want to cash in on my inheritance now. So instead of disciplining him and punishing him, the father goes ahead and agrees, and he gives him his part of the estate. And it says a few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings, moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time the money ran out, a great famine swept over their land, and he began to starve. So he persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and so the farmer sent him into the fields and said, you can feed my pigs. And then it says, obviously the farmer wasn't paying him much, because it says he was so hungry that even the food he was feeding to the pigs looked good to him. And I would bet that most of you here haven't taken care of pigs, but pigs pretty much eat anything. They pretty much eat slop. They're like the cheapest animal to fatten up, and that's why pork is so inexpensive. And so he's like, whatever the pigs are eating looks so good to me because I'm that hungry. Versus this man, this son came from a pretty affluent family. To be able to give half of your estate over to your son and still be like, okay, this father was very wealthy. And so he went from wealthy with his father to wanting what pigs ate because he cashed in on his inheritance. It says, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I'm dying of hunger. And in this story, the son runs away. It's his choice to run away. Or is it his choice? Are the lost because they want to be lost, or have they been taken? It might not matter. You might be like, that doesn't matter. Why are you asking that question? And I'll tell you I'm asking that question because it changes what our obligation is to them. That's why we have to know the answer to that question. Are they lost because they want to be lost? This son willingly walked away from his father, right? Or are they simply captives who have been taken? Let me expand it like this. This is also going to explain the question that people ask you, why would a loving God send people to hell? This is kind of like, this is how it goes. So this is like the beginning of my life, and let's just say like I live a normal, regular life. There's no extraordinary circumstances where I can't make my own decisions. I live to a normal age. I just have a normal kind of existence. According to the Word of God, according to the truth, if I just live my life just like normal and I make no significant decision to follow Jesus, He's not sending me to hell. Hell was always my destination since the moment I was born. I don't know if you guys know that, but we were born away from God. We were born because of sin. We were born away from God, but at some point we also are away from God by choice. Right? We are born into it, but there becomes a time where we become old enough where we can choose God, and there's an option to not choose Him. But if that all happens, we're not being sent to hell at the end. We're just ending up at the destination that we were walking towards the whole time. What Jesus does is He provides us a way out. He offers us an opportunity to be saved from what our destiny should be. So I can make a decision to come up here and be saved from what my destiny was always going to be. And yeah, I would say that there's a chance that I could see this way, pivot this way, and decide I'm going to come up here all on my own. And the truth is, we'll all stand before God one day. And we will all, Romans says that no one has an excuse to not follow Him. So if I just live a normal life from here to there and end up in hell, that really is going to be on me, right? Because Romans says that no one has an excuse. Here's the thing. I need some people who are like, not going to let me fall on my butt and who are okay at like improving things. Izzy, you knew. You didn't have to raise your hand. Michael, can you help me? Pastor Joel, can you help me? Okay, so... Dale. All right. Okay. So, give it up for Izzy. Give it up for Michael. Give it up for Pastor Joel. Wow. That was it. That was the competition. Okay. So they're up here. They've made that decision. Somehow it happened that they decided to live above here. They're saved from this path. So now I'm walking on this path. Don't fail me now, Izzy. I'm walking on this path, and Izzy sees me walking on this path. And so then he offers to help me. Okay, too long. I'm just kidding. Okay, so he sees me walking. He's like, girl, I know that destination. Do you want to come up here? And I'm like, no, thank you. And then I keep walking. And then Michael sees me walking. And he's like, hey, do you want to come up here? I could help you. And so now I'm being made aware that there's another option for me. Because they're seeing me from a different perspective than I'm seeing myself. They're seeing my destination maybe in a way that I can't see my destination because I don't yet know God. And so I'm walking past them, and they have their hand extended, and I'm like, no, thank you. But I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I didn't even know that option existed. But I'm not ready to do it. And then there's another person like, hey, I'll help you up. And I'm like, oof, I don't know. It seems kind of weird up there. And then another, I keep walking. And then someone comes along, and they're not weird about it, and they offer me this thing, and then they're like, hey, I could actually help you up. And because it was the third time, I actually said yes, because I had been reminded on my path that maybe there's another option. And I might have said no to the first two. But guess what? They didn't reach out to me because of their obligation to me. They reached out to me because of their obligation to God. And I might have denied their invitation, but they have now fulfilled their obligation to God who sent them. What would happen, though, if these three get in a huddle up? Sports. Okay. What would happen if these three were so consumed? This is their favorite part. What would happen if these three are so consumed with where they're at and with each other, and they kind of in their peripherals see me walking, and they're like, well, everyone makes their own choice. We can't force anyone. She's wearing that shirt, and I don't like that thing. Okay, and so then now I'm just walking. They're noticing I'm walking, and they don't invite me up. So now I'm left to decide if I want to step onto this stage and accept this way or not. And yet, I could say no to Jesus at the end. So I have not fulfilled my personal obligation to God. But at the same time, they have also not fulfilled their obligation to God. It's not an obligation to me, but it would be an obligation to the one that they serve. All right, thank you for your help, gentlemen. I'm just kidding. We weren't going to run into each other. So are the lost just wandering? Are they sober-mindedly not following God because they hate him? Maybe. Is that any of our business? Probably not. For 2 Timothy 2:25, Paul describes people who don't know Jesus like this. He calls them opponents, which is crazy, right? He says opponents must be gently instructed. And we're like, yeah, opponents. In the hope that God will grant them repentance, leading them to the knowledge of the truth. And that they will come to their senses, and then listen, they will escape from the trap of the devil who has taken them captive to do his will. So are they lost, or have they been taken? 2 Corinthians 2:14 says people who aren't spiritual, which that's not like, I believe in crystals. Like it's spiritual in this context means having the Spirit of God in them. They're like, it's me. People who aren't spiritual, who aren't saved, who don't know Jesus, they can't receive. This is impossible. They're saying it's impossible. They cannot receive these truths from God's Spirit. Everything sounds foolish to them. They can't understand it. For only those who are filled with the Spirit of God can understand what the Spirit means. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, Satan, who is the god of this world, has blinded the minds of those who don't believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. So did they run away or were they taken? Here's how it goes. And I'm going to preach different tonight, and I need you guys to be with me and help me out. Is that good? Okay. Here's the thing. Humans are no match for the devil. Everyone's like, is that true? Is she tricking us? No, listen. I am no match for the devil. I have never been referred to as the God of this world. The devil is an angelic creation. Angels are more powerful than humans. So I am no competition for the devil. And no human being is. Stay with me. In 1973, there was an escaped convict named Jan Erik, and he escaped prison, and then in the streets of the capital city of Sweden, he decides to rob a bank. Like he's gonna go big. I mean, he already ran away from prison, right? So he's like, I'm going for it. And what happens is he ends up taking some of the workers at the bank hostage, not just for like a couple hours, but they end up being in a hostage situation for 6 days. Yes, I know. It was the 70s. I don't know. And these hostages, I mean, they're being watched under guard. The police are trying to negotiate their release. And the craziest thing starts to happen. They start to let the hostages talk to the police to make sure, we want to make sure they're alive because we're not going to keep negotiating with you if they're dead. So they start talking to the police. The police notice that after a few days, the hostages seem to be a lot more suspicious of the police than they are of their captors. They even start to notice that they start sort of speaking and referring warmly to the men who are right now guarding them in a safe in a bank, could kill them at any moment. Even when the hostages were finally released after 6 days, they said that they would not come out of the bank before Jan Erik and his accomplice. They said, we won't go before them because if we go before them, you'll gun them down. So the hostages all of a sudden became like the protectors of their captors. It was insane. And then as the story kept unfolding, once they were saved out of that, they started referring to all these moments where genuinely a friendship was created between the ones who took them captive and the ones who were being held. And that happened in the city of Stockholm, and that's where the term Stockholm Syndrome comes from. It's when you all of a sudden find this warmth with a captor. This is what the kind of the phenomenon they describe as feelings of trust or affection, in many cases of kidnapping or hostage taking by a victim towards a captor. And so we kind of know this is a coping mechanism. That's what this is. No one really is in love with someone who hurts them. But the way sometimes our mind decides to cope with it is by creating an affection and a trust with the one who's hurting us. And see, you have to understand that some people cope with the world by befriending it. And those people will probably be more weary of you trying to rescue them than they are of the world that has them captive. Some of those people might need to be forced to be rescued because that's how they've decided to cope with the world. But they're still captives in need of someone to rescue them. I'm about to show my age and everyone else in this room too, but if I say the name Elizabeth Smart, who knows what I'm talking about? Elizabeth Smart. Okay, Elizabeth Smart was literally the reason that my parents would never let me go to the mall by myself. My parents had basically no rules for me except that which would maybe get me kidnapped. And so I was never allowed to answer the door, answer the phone, nothing. Elizabeth Smart became one of the most famous 14-year-old girls in the world when I was really young because she was taken from her bedroom at night. The bedroom she actually shared with her younger sister. She was taken out of her room and she was missing. And she was missing for 9 months. And I remember seriously, because my parents already, they were like, yeah, this is why you can't play in the yard. And I was like, okay. I was like, I don't want to play in the yard. And what's crazy is usually these stories end and maybe her body was found, but she actually was found alive 9 months later, only about 20 miles away from her house. And this year actually marked the 20-year anniversary of Elizabeth Smart coming home, which is crazy. So they were interviewing her, and what happened is a lot of people started to feel when she was saved at 14, a lot of people started to feel like she had Stockholm syndrome, because when she would tell her stories, she really did whatever her captors asked her to do. It even seemed like maybe when they were trying to rescue her, she seemed a little hesitant to trust the police. And what happened to her was horrific. For 9 months straight, the captor and there was a woman and a man who abducted her, and they decided she was going to be that man's new wife. And you can probably fill in all of those details. And so she was horrifically abused for 9 months. And they felt like, well, she's so young, it feels like maybe the warmth she showed to her abductors, she probably had Stockholm syndrome. And they actually asked her about that in an interview that I want to show you, and this is what she says about it.
You know, the phrase that's always used is sometimes trauma survivors had Stockholm syndrome. They've either go along with their captors, they're in love with their captors, they're brainwashed. What do you say to that?
I think that's a huge misunderstanding. I mean, how does a person, if you really think about it, fall in love with someone who is mean, with someone who is cruel? You don't. Most people have heard of fight or flight. Freeze is becoming more accepted, but many people have not heard of appease yet. And appease it's not something you maybe necessarily consciously think about. It's something that you just automatically do. And it's doing what you have to do.
She's talking about appeasing in order to survive. You know that some people are living to appease the world because it's the only way they can think of to survive. You ever seen someone in that light? Someone who's raging against God and you're like offended by what they're wearing? Do you ever think that maybe they're appeasing the world that they know because they think there's no other way they'll make it through? But all that they're hoping is that someone comes to rescue them. And they're appeasing and they're appeasing and they're losing hope every day that someone is still looking for them. But they want to be rescued. A super personal story, and I don't even know, I probably just need to tell a couple details because the floodgates have started. When I was 9 years old, this is crazy, I haven't even thought about this in a long time, but when I was 9 years old, my mom came like in the morning to wake me up, and I'm like, girl, what you want? And she sits me down, and like, neither one of us loves to be serious, but she was very serious, and I was like, what happened? And she's like, first of all, she's okay. She's like, but last night, your cousin was abducted. And I was like, what? My cousin, who a year younger than me, was taken from her house. And I'm like, this doesn't happen. Like, this happens on the news. This doesn't happen to someone I know. She was taken from her house by a family friend and a predator. And so obviously, thankfully, my mom started with, she's home and she's okay. But learning then what happened, this is sort of how it goes. I'll just kind of tell you the ending. She was taken in the middle of the night. Her family didn't even know. They were asleep in the master bedroom, which was in the back of the house. And when she woke up and sort of asked what was going on, the person that she knew, it was very clear the intent was probably that she wouldn't make it out of that night alive. Because he was not trying to fake, like, oh, it's okay, it's going to be okay. He hit her. He told her to shut up. So at one point, they're driving at this point far away from our part of town. One point, she kind of realizes what's about to happen. Stops the car. The kidnapper gets out of the car to come around to the side and basically gets ready to start what probably would have been the last couple minutes of her life in a horrific way. She's an 8-year-old girl. So just seeing and almost that fight or flight mentality, she runs as fast as she can. Pretty sure that he's gonna run after her or get in his car and maybe just run her over. By some miracle, the kidnapper gets in his car and speeds away the other direction. So now there's this 8-year-old girl in the middle of the country. She's at an intersection. She sees all darkness this way, all darkness this way. And then just so happens that the reflection of a mailbox. And she thinks, well, if there's a mailbox, there's probably a house. So she just goes. It's 3 a.m. She goes, she knocks on this door. And I don't know who answers their door at 3 a.m, but this kind lady answered the door. And my cousin said, I've been kidnapped. I need to call my family. How great is it that she found someone willing to help her? How great is it that she didn't knock on a door of someone who wasn't going to believe her or was going to be too afraid to get involved or who was going to take advantage of her? You know that some people in the world, they're running as fast as they can because they know that they're in trouble. But what they need is a kind stranger who will help them to come home. We just see people as, oh, that's just a waitress. This is just my busted coworker. Oh, this is just that person. Not understanding that they're captives and they need someone to rescue them. I pray that we would go into this next season of our lives seeing people the way God sees them. Because everyone copes with being taken in a different way. But the truth remains right here, that they have been taken and that the search party is responsible for bringing them home. Is it their choice to walk away, to run away, to never know God? I don't know. But I know that it's my obligation to go and do my darndest to let them know that there's a rescuer available to them. We can get offended by the world for serving the devil, or we can understand that humans are no match for him. And we can understand that because this is the good news is that the devil is then also no match for Christ. Like, we could not fight the devil, but the devil cannot fight Christ. And that's the good news. And here's what it means for us who have the Spirit of God. 2 Corinthians 4:10 says, and Christ, this is how we go from like busted under the devil to like victory over the devil. It says this is why in 2 Corinthians 4:10, because Christ lives in you. So even though your body dies because of sin, the Spirit gives you life because you've been made right with God. The Spirit of God, who raised Jesus from the dead, lives in you. And that's how we have victory over the enemy. It says, dear brothers and sisters, you have no obligation to do what your sinful nature urges you to do. Here's what that means. We who are saved have victory over the enemy only because Jesus lives inside of us. It is not us who has victory over the enemy. It is the Christ inside of us. There is a resurrecting, death is defeated power inside of you if you are a born-again believer. And that is the only reason that you and I do not have an obligation to our sinful nature. So how could we put that burden on someone who Christ does not live in? If it says that we no longer have an obligation, what it means is that at one point, when Christ didn't live inside of us, we did have an obligation to sin. At one point, before we met Jesus, we were servants of the prince of this world. They've been taken. Will you negotiate their ransom? I need you guys to help me. I need every single person in this room, and this is gonna I'm very nervous. I need every single person in this room to have one seat in between them and the person next to them. Okay, so just start. If you're like, does it include me? Yes. Leaders can help. There's a lot of space. Some of you might have to just jump sections. I'm sorry. I tried to wait as long as I could. I know, we're so nervous. Who's gonna look at me? That's good. There's a lot of room over here if you still need some. Make sure there's one seat between you and the person next to you. There's still some over here too. Noah Wilson, he's got some space. He would love for you to sit one seat away from him. Are we good-ish? Raise your hand if there's an empty seat next to you. Some of you did it, but you're not raising your hand. That's crazy. Okay, I think we're good. If we're not good, you are going to feel bad about it by the end of tonight. Okay. They've been taken, and it's our job to negotiate their ransom. I'm going to read to you the rest of the story in Luke chapter 15. Verse 20, once his son came to his senses, it says that he returned home to his father. And this part, if you are a born-again believer, this part should always make you feel so giddy and thankful. It says that while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Some of us were a long way off. And it's crazy that whole time our father saw us coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son. He embraced him. He kissed him. And his son tried to do this whole speech like that we try to do, like, I just have done so much. I've gone too far. I've murdered. And it's like, whoa, really? That's how I feel. God's like, I know. Okay. And then, so he does this whole speech, and it's kind of like the father's not even listening to him. The father's talking to his servants. He's like, quick, get the finest robe and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger. Get sandals for his feet. Kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast. For the son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he's found. And then the Jesus, the Bible says, same thing, amen, he's the word, yeah. It says he was lost and he was found, and then it said, so the party began. My son who was lost is now found, and so the party began. This is such an amazing story, but you know that what it really speaks to, it really doesn't talk about us. It just speaks to the wonderful kindness of our Father. That's really what it talks about. We're not really in this story as the church. This is just describing the intimate moment that hopefully everyone in this room has experienced when a lost son or daughter is sort of trembling home, hoping the father will love them, and then the father comes and embraces them and celebrates that they've come home. This is really just a story about how God reacts when the lost are found. So what is the ransom that we're supposed to pay? What are we supposed to do? What is our part in this? Anyone go on a vacation this summer out of town? You had to at least go past Winter Park. Okay, for it to count. I went to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so think the North Michigan and then keep going, because my grandparents lived there. They are the coolest people ever. I never realized it till I got married, and she was like, wow, your grandparents are the coolest people ever. And so one of the things they do, they live in a cabin that they built themselves, and it's this whole thing. And so my grandpa's a bear hunter. He actually has bear hunting dogs. It was always my favorite part of going to see them, except for obviously spending time with my loved ones. So this was this summer, this little puppy was born. And he's so cute. His eyes weren't even open at first. You can go to the next one. So he has these dogs, and it's and there's Christopher Dean. And that's what we named him. So this dog is so cute. They're hunting dogs. They're made, just because you're going to get offended, but they were made to be outside dogs. They're not really pet dogs unless you just want to go crazy. You can keep going, just going through them, but they're so cute and they're so nice, and they're meant to hunt. They are begging for some animal to kill. That's how they are, but they're really sweet to humans and stuff. So Gio was invited, my grandpa invited him to go bear hunting with him, because that's what he does with the dogs. They're bear hunting dogs. And so the whole time they're going, they're just talking about bear hunting. And Gio told me this story that I actually remember being told. This is my mom. And then with the dog, that dog just had a baby. What's up, mama? That's the mom of the baby. Anyways, doesn't matter about their lineage. So they were talking about the new ways to bear hunt and all this kind of stuff. And I think Gio maybe asked, or something happened to where it was like, well, what happens like if one of the dog, like you're ready to pack up, because the dogs just like go through the woods and look for bears, and then it's just like, all right, let's go home. So what happens if like you're bear hunting for a while and like one of your dogs doesn't come back to the truck? Seems pretty bad, right? Like these are like, you can't just like take a little poodle out with you the next time. Like these dogs are born and bred to hunt. And so my grandpa told Gio this story that I remember hearing when I was little. And he said, you know, there's been numerous times throughout the years that one of my dogs has gotten lost. I'll call them, I'll wait a little bit, because my grandpa like loves his hunting dogs. But there's a point where I have to leave. And so I'm like, so what? Like the dog just remains lost forever? That's horrible. I'm calling the police. Like, how dare you? And so he's like, no, never. He's like, what I do is I usually just take off my hoodie that I have on, and I leave it like near the side of the road, because I know like the grounds really well. And so I leave it near the side of the road, and then I come back every couple of hours to see if the dog is there. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, dogs are really smart, but also like really dumb. It's like, how can you sniff cancer, but you're licking your butt? So, you know, his dogs, like, they're not like sad, like writing in their journal, like, I'm lost from my owner. Like, they're just like, what's up? I'm in the woods. And, but he knows like, oh, they're lost. So this is what would happen though. Their noses are really good. And so somewhere along the lines where they got lost, they'd be sniffing, and they would come upon his hoodie that smelled just like him, had spent so much time on him, just had his scent all over it. And what the dogs would do is they would not really understand why, because they're dogs, but they would like lay down on the hoodie. And they weren't like, again, like they're not like, and then I chose to lay down on the hoodie. They just would do it. Instinctively, they just decided, well, I'm sniffing. And then they're like, there you go, hoodie that smells like my owner. I'll go ahead and lay there. And so every time, that's how he would find his lost dogs. He would go back every few hours, go back every few days, and without fail, the dog would eventually, they wouldn't find their way home. They didn't maybe know where he went, but they would find his scent, and just something on the inside of them would tell them, I need to stay here. And then when they would stay there, he would come back for them. And they would be found. And they would be reunited with their owner. So what's the ransom? What's the price that we pay? It's understanding that we're never just thrown anywhere. We're not thrown into our job. We're not thrown into our school. We're not thrown into that vacation, into that restaurant that we go into. No. Do you understand that we are being sent as God's sent to those who are lost, whether or not they are looking for their way home? Because everyone is born with the need for God. So when we are spread out across this world, that instinct inside of them that they don't even know what it is, they're so attracted to us. For some reason, they keep opening up to us. I'm like, it's Wawa, dude. Like, just make the sandwich. Why are you talking about your divorce? Why are they talking about their divorce? Because you smell like something that they remember. You smell like something that's safe to them. We're not their saviors. We're not their masters. But if we would smell like home, a home that maybe they've never even been to before, if they could find us, then that's when Luke 15 takes over, where it says that the Father, even while they were long off, the Father saw them coming because he knew where he left his scent. And when he was coming to collect up those who were lost, it wasn't on accident. It was because he was planning on finding them all along. They're going to pass out some paraphernalia. That's probably a bad word. They're going to pass out some stuff. In a second, I'm going to read the Bible, so help me. I know teachers, it's horrible when you pass out papers, your students stop listening. But just let's not channel that. They're going to pass out some stuff. If you'll just take one label and one pen as ushers pass it out, and then listen to what 2 Corinthians 2:14 says. It says, now he, Now God uses us to spread the knowledge of Christ everywhere like a sweet perfume. Our lives are a Christ-like fragrance rising up to God. And this fragrance is perceived differently by those being saved and those who are perishing, by those who are well along on the way and those who have not yet started. Sometimes we're going to smell like death and doom because people are going to not maybe understand, but they understand that we signify judgment currently in their life because they were refusing to know God. So some people are going to be offended just by our scent. Some people, though, who maybe we didn't even notice, but they've been looking and they've been searching. All of a sudden, we're gonna smell to them like a life-giving perfume. And they're gonna find us, and then they'll find him. Luke 14:16-23, Jesus talks about a man who prepared a feast, and he sent out all these invitations. And basically, when the dinner was ready, no one wanted to come who was invited. So the servant returned and told his master what they said. His master was furious. He said, go quickly in the streets, go to the alleys of the town, invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. So the servant's like, done, done, done. Then he said, there's still room for more. So the master said, okay, now go into the country lanes, go behind the hedges, urge anyone you find to come so that my house will be full. What's our role? We search, we party, and then we keep searching. And we search and we're like, Lord, we got some more. And he's like, dope, there's still room for more. Go behind the hedge. We're like, okay, cool. And then he's like, oh, we got some more. And he's like, oh, there's room for more. And then we're like, okay, quick, party. They came to know you. Okay, and then I'm gonna keep going. And that's the price that we are asked to pay. We search, we party, and we keep searching. And here's why. I feel like in Luke 14, it was a little bit hypothetical, right? Like, go find anyone. So then in Luke 15, Jesus made it very personal. And he said, no, but it's a son. Here's what he also said, though, that I kind of skipped over. But in verse 11, he says that the man had 2 sons. He had 2 sons, which means that not only was this a lost son, but this was a lost brother. It matters that there were 2 sons, because if you keep reading the story, the brother who was left was very hurt that his brother left. And we can't really afford to be hurt and offended by our brothers who leave, but let me put it like this. Does anyone in this room have a loved one who doesn't know Jesus? Like, who you really, really, really want them to know Jesus? Okay. Don't you wish that the Christians at their workplace would love them the way you love them? Isn't it crazy to think there are probably Christians within the circumference of their influence who just have not noticed your brother? Isn't it crazy to think that Christians in their workplace could be going to their churches and hearing about how they're supposed to invite the lost, and yet they just don't see your brother with the love that you see your brother with? And isn't it crazy that's probably all of us too? That every waitress is probably someone's niece that they've been praying for? That every coworker we have is probably someone's dad that they've been praying for? And they're just they're praying to God, please send people. And God's like, I'm sending them, but they're just not talking. And at the same time, that could be us for someone else's loved one. That we just don't have the time or the boldness to talk to them. But we have to understand that every lost person has loved ones praying for them to come home. So here's the question. Who's coming home next week?
Thank you for listening to a Mainstream Orlando podcast. We hope you join us again soon.